Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, depending on where in the world you're joining us from. Welcome to our expert panel, The Readiness Gap, Why Many Enterprises Fail at Data Democratization, brought to you by our friends at AtScale. I'm Brian Mink, co-founder and president of Data Science Connect, the world's largest data and AI community. Today, we're excited to welcome hundreds of attendees from all over the world to discuss why so many data democratization efforts stall out, and what it really takes to move beyond surface-level access to meaningful, scalable insight. Enterprises are investing heavily in modern data stacks, self-service platforms, and AI initiatives. But without the right foundation, these investments often underdeliver. Cultural resistance, governance trade-offs, and legacy bottlenecks can all stand in the way. Today's discussion is about getting real, what readiness actually means, how to identify hidden blockers, and what strategies are working for organizations that have cracked the code. Whether you're navigating fragmented ecosystems or trying to scale access responsibly, this conversation is all about turning ambition into impact. We're honored to hear from a distinguished panel of experts today. Dave Mariani, CTO and founder at AtScale, Shashank Kaditodud, Senior Director, Enterprise Data Science and AI Delivery at Mars Snacking Chief Data Office, and Yugandhar Dasi, Enterprise AI Architect at T-Mobile. Before we begin, a few housekeeping items. First, to make this feel a little more in person, we suggest you add a photo to your profile and include your bio, LinkedIn profile, and any other information you want your fellow attendees to see. Next, please take advantage of the Q&A and chat features in the right sidebar. We'll be addressing your questions throughout the webinar, so be sure to upvote the questions you'd like the panel to address. If you're wondering where your organization stands compared to others on your AI journey, check out the poll questions in the right sidebar. And finally, to learn more about how to leverage data democratization in your AI journey, check out the calls to action below throughout the webinar from our sponsor, AtScale. Now, without further ado, I'd like to welcome our panelists to the stage. Welcome, guys. So before we get started with our discussion, just want to give a quick disclaimer that panelist commentary does not necessarily reflect the views of their organizations. So with that out of the way, we will kick things off with introductions. So we'll start in the order you appear on my screen. So Shashank, why don't you introduce yourself?
Sure, Brian. Hey, everybody. I'm excited to be a part of this session. So I've been in the data science AI space for close to 16 years now, primarily in the retail space, and which includes the likes of Amazon, Home Depot, and Walmart e-commerce. So currently in my role, I lead the enterprise data science and AI team in Mars Snacking. So I'm excited to be a part of this discussion. I look forward to it.
Excellent. Welcome. Yugandhar?
Hello everyone. Thanks Brian for having me today. I'm Ivan Darcy, technical staff AI architect at T-Mobile. I've been with the company for more than a decade and primarily designed and developed a couple of big data systems and large scale data systems. And currently I'm focusing heavily on solving some of our business complex problems using AI and primarily Gen AI. Thanks a lot for this opportunity and discussion.
Excellent. Welcome. And Dave?
Hi, everyone. My name is Dave Mariani. I'm the CTO and founder of AtScale. AtScale provides a universal semantic layer. So data democratization and enterprise and the title of this webinar are very appropriate. So a universal semantic layer allows you to do data democratization at scale, pun intended, while providing governance and consistency for all your users. So thanks for hosting, Brian, and great to meet and chat with you, Shashank and Yugandhar.
Excellent. Well, welcome all of you. Very excited for a great conversation. So I'm going to start with our first question here, and one thing that we're seeing, especially over the last couple of years, as organizations move beyond the hype of AI and really start to see where the rubber meets the road in terms of ROI, is that there's a lot of investment in data democratization efforts, but not always the adoption or the impact that organizations are hoping for to go along with that. So what are the most common failure patterns that you guys have seen? And what do you think they reveal more generally about enterprise readiness for AI and for advanced data science technologies. Dave, why don't you start with that one?
Thanks. So the most common failure patterns. So we see a lot, like if I just take my own experience, that sort of was the inspiration for starting at scale. Yeah, you know, I was at Yahoo running analytics, and we had everybody had their own stack. So I was central IT, basically had to deliver data sets to the business. That's the advertising business, search and display, as all of our audience teams, which ran all the individual sites, front page, sports, finance, etc. They all had their own stacks. And ultimately, because they had their own stacks and because we didn't really have a strategy for reconciling all those stacks, we couldn't agree on the most basic metrics of the business, which are clicks and impressions. So when it came to sort of comparing performance across the sites, when it came to measuring search versus display performance, it was really next to impossible. And so what we saw there is a sort of a breakdown of moving from a centrally controlled analytics model to a pure distributed model where it's all distributed in the business. And having the pendulum swing so far to one way to the other just means that you have no governance, you have you have no controls, and so you end up doing a whole lot of work and creating a whole lot of inconsistency, and you destroy trust in data. So to me, without having really a true governance structure in place, data democratization can really become something that really destroys trust in data rather than having the intended consequence of providing access to more people to make more decisions with that data.
Yeah, excellent points and insights from your experience there. Uganda, what have you seen?
Yeah, completely agree with Dave on like, especially the fragmented data and having the governance. And there is like other aspects to it, like, having the people side of it, like, because like things are moving so fast and we need to make sure that people are well trained on the new tools and technologies. And it relates to the user experience, right? The usability of those platforms on how well the people are trained. And definitely it also boils down to the leadership support on, the executive support. If we have those things, I think definitely, we can avoid some of these common failure patterns.
Great points, Shashank.
Yeah, I think great points by Dave and Gandhar. I would also mention, I think there's a whole cultural aspect a bit that you Gandhar touched on, where, it's typically approached from a very tool perspective, a problem like this, such as data democratization. But there's a whole people and process aspect, right, that often is an afterthought. Are people sufficiently trained? Do they fully understand the power of the data they're dealing with? Just having a tool and being able to actively train them on those platforms and tools, I think, are critical. Plus, there's also, I think, an aspect of we have seen it kind of overdone as well, in the sense that there's a bit of a straight jacket, right? Like, it's very difficult to get access to data in a timely manner, because there's this whole entire overgoverned process, right, that you'll have to go through. So I've seen it actually swing both ways in some of the companies and the experiences I've had. And I think there's something to be said to kind of focus on a more, dynamic way of governance, right? That is more granular than what we typically see. Yeah.
Yeah, that really tees up nicely for our next question, Shashank, which is when we talk about data democratization, a lot of times access becomes a critical issue, as we're going to give access to all these users throughout the organization. But what it really takes to get there as well is not just having the access, but to you guys' points, making it usable. So how do you make the data actually usable once you give folks access? What are they then going to do with it to actually move the needle in their various respective functions? So how do you guys define organizational readiness in that context? What does it take to actually get there, to actually be able to move the needle by using this data effectively, leveraging it in these various different business units and capacities outside of just having the access or just having the tools. Uganda, why don't you start with that one?
Yeah, so whatever like we were discussing in the previous question correlates here to like example, data is there, but if it is not of a good quality, people will not trust it. So data has to be reliable, consistent, and ease of use, and it should have proper governance, as Dave mentioned, to ensure that data quality is enabled, so people can really trust the data. And the second is the same, like, okay, we have the data, but how is the user experience actually, correlate to that? Whether, do they have sufficient tools, technologies, and ease of use of access to those data things? So, and also getting these, data catalog, lineage, how well the data is kind of, giving more information about the itself. Without that, the user getting access is it takes time again to understand self-querying, so that's like the user experience matters. And also like the lot of nowadays like businesses are coming, even the non-technical users, into the analysis phase, like they want to do self-serve rather than depending on the IT. So how will we create programs or kind of workshop where we open up the doors for business also to come and explore the data, the data literacy programs. And this again boils down to the same thing, culture, right? If you enable a data-driven culture, these all things will definitely, add to these things that, okay, your organization will be ready to open up the gates.
Yeah, great points. User experience, culture, all those very critical, data quality, of course. Dave, what are your thoughts?
So I like what you Gunnar said about just about bringing the business into the equation, and then letting them do self-service. And so when we talk about organizational readiness, we should probably define what should an analytics organization look like. I think a lot of talk has been around tooling and the like, including, at scale and at scale semantic layer. That's a tool, that's a platform, that's technology, but it really is people. And I like how we're talking about culture too. But what I've seen as a model that works really well to sort of get, Shashank was talking about the push and the pull between too central versus too distributed. And I've seen customers be really successful using more of a hub and spoke style. So a hub being sort of a center of excellence, and that typically is the BI team or the IT team, where they're not necessarily, they're not the gatekeepers per se. They're responsible for, providing that governance layer, the tools, so that everybody's is basically using the same tools and has the right access. But then you let the business sort of create their own data products, using sort of that infrastructure. So you kind of have a best of both worlds where you have the center of excellence is, can drive culture, it can drive the training by helping the business to do analytics and build data products on their own, but they can also provide the governance and infrastructure to make sure that the business is not going hog wild and doing things that the enterprise is not comfortable with. So I think that we should really talk a lot more about the people aspect and the organization aspect, because I think if you do that right, then you can provide tools to help enable that motion. But all IT controlled or all business controlled, neither one of those to me are a good idea. You need to kind of find a happy medium in the middle, where both of those teams can have their roles, and participate equally.
Yeah, I really like the hub and spoke model, the hybrid approach. I think that's a great way to address that issue. Shashank, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think most of it was covered by Ugandar and Dave. I think great points. Probably I would elaborate a little more on one of the points Ugandar touched upon, which is the training slash data literacy bit. I don't think it can be overstated, right? Especially as we open doors to, quote unquote, non-technical users, so to speak. I think it becomes very critical that, you know, while the focus is on data findability, data quality, data reliability, I think there's something to be said about also teaching things like not just accessing the data, but how do you actually modify and how do you actually build a case out of it, right? From how do you generate a hypothesis, something basic from access to all the way to, you know, b- interpreting statistical modeling, something like that. So I think the literacy program that any company embarks on should kind of encompass the end to end and give opportunity for those users to become power users. And that's how you actually have power users. They get, they're just not exposed to the whole problem solving aspect that they start to get exposed to through a literacy program. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. We've had a lot of great comments about culture and literacy. We've got a really good question in the chat that I want to get to as well, from Abhijit. How can organizations, especially in sensitive industries, begin leveraging semantic modeling effectively, even if our underlying data infrastructure is still immature? And I think that does get to a point about culture, as well as some of the infrastructure that's required. Is, a lot of organizations want to jump from step 1 to step 10 and get really advanced and do a lot of things. And there needs to be some balance there, but also there are some opportunities there. You don't necessarily have to have everything all buttoned up and figured out in order to start leveraging some data democratization, doing some semantic modeling. So what do you guys think about that question? Thoughts there?
I would love to chime in on that one. So I hear that all the time, where we have customers who are definitely interested in deploying a semantic layer, but they're like, well, we first have to get all our data in Snowflake, or we first have to get all our data in Databricks or BigQuery, fill in the blank. And what I often tell them is like, just, you don't need to boil the ocean. If you just pick a use case that has where you feel pain, or there's a real gap in the business and then what the business needs, you can start to define your semantic models and build your semantic models. And that really helps focus on what to do next, and even the order that you migrate data if you're moving data to the cloud. And then when you do that, if you have a semantic model and you have semantic models to serve those analytics, you also can provide a firewall. So even though you may build that semantic model on Oracle data that wants to become Snowflake data, tomorrow, you can make that switch from Oracle to Snowflake, and those users would never know the difference if they're talking to the semantic layer. So it's like, I think it's a tendency for organizations to want to do a big bang, and I think that it makes more sense to sort of get started sooner rather than later, because I think there's a lot of value and a lot of learnings that can be had just in embarking on a semantic modeling sort of journey.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. Really testing out, validating certain use cases, and then using that to form the basis of your broader strategy. Shashank or Uganda, any questions or any other comments on that one?
Yeah, I don't think there's much to add there. I think you hit it right. You hit the nail on the head.
Excellent. Well, I'll jump to our next question here. So we've had a lot of good discussion around organizational readiness. One of the key components to rolling out data democratization across an organization, though, of course, involves security and compliance. And so there's a couple of dual concerns here. On the one hand, governance is often the reason that data access is limited. But as organizations are trying to expand data access, trying to democratize use cases across their organization to non-specialists, lots of new security and compliance questions start to crop up. So what do you guys think in terms of how you balance those two things with your governance? How do you balance those various objectives? Shashank, why don't we start with you on that one?
Yeah, sure. I think there is obviously balance is critical in such a stage. I would say, like, yeah, there are several things you can now consider, right? Something like role based access, or attribute based access, which is going to be a little more granular. Then there's something to be said about even automated data classification and tagging. So first, I would say one is obviously the access part, which is critical, and I think it can be very data contextual and use case contextual. But there's also something to be said about um, you can't govern what you don't know, right? I think a lot of organizations kind of deal with this, even the more mature ones, right? We just don't know where all our data lies. We don't know how clean it is, and that's where I think implementing tools that can help scan, tag, classify are important. Yeah.
Absolutely. Ugandar?
Yeah, I think Sishan touched on the role, security, access, governance. So just on the similar lines, right? As an architect, so I usually emphasize more on when you're designing a system or a platform. We have this principle called, security, privacy by design, which actually emphasizes least privilege principle. So you really don't need to give everything to everyone. So when we apply these gating principles while designing the system, it will give you the right access needed for the right job to do their, whatever they have to do. So that has a downside of it, like people usually come and complain saying like, yeah, I don't have access for this, I cannot experiment on it. So for those things, organizations, every organization has a different way of doing it. So coming up with a sandbox or a experimental zone or a pre-prod where the data is not sensitive and more anonymized, and or it's a synthetic data where people can really don't need to have the real data production like, but at least they can experiment and then they can, that's how you in the very tightly controlled environments, right? So we need to open up for innovation by having these flexible approaches. Yeah, and also one thing is like, especially in the security and compliance side, if you see, we have seen a lot of improvement on the technology side. Like it can be automated data masking, it can be new ways of encrypting the data. Even now we have technology that without even encrypting, like we have access controls that can actually mask the data without actually applying the data at rest encryption. So the technology is actually helping a lot to minimize the gaps between these. Uh, I need to have security, but I need to also have to have compliance. So that is actually playing good so far.
Yeah, great points, Ugandar. Dave?
Yeah, in BI land and business intelligence land, you could always sort of apply some of those controls in the BI tools themselves or the BI platforms themselves. And now with AI and agents, it's like the problem is so much worse, right? So if I were doing it over again, I would really sort of invest in if I did have my data in a platform like a Snowflake or Databricks or BigQuery, I really would invest in role-based access controls, RBAC, and really sort of providing the right controls and access to the data itself. And then, of course, with a semantic layer like ours, you can provide additional controls on top. But really, it's like if like I really hate locking down the data, and so assume the data is all locked down and then you're going to just open it up for certain use cases. That's kind of like, and that's a very restrictive type of policy. You would really like to get to the point where you could apply the controls on your data in for at rest in those data platforms, and then have the confidence that regardless of how that data is consumed, which you have no idea how it's going to be consumed, that those controls are going to be applied consistently. So, if I could do it again, I probably would start at the data platform layer, and I would make sure that, um, and I would start with, I know people are going to shoot me, but at least a goal of everything being available rather than nothing being available. And it's an exception to get access versus an exception to deny access, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, that's a very interesting and provocative, but also good. I mean, I think transformative framework when organizations can do it effectively is that the idea that we're flipping this in terms of what should be the default. I think that's where we're going to have to be headed if organizations want to effectively democratize data. I think that's an excellent point.
Yeah, Brian. I mean, look, if you're, especially with agents and chatbots and the like, it's like you don't really know. I mean, even in the old school sort of auto ML or machine learning, you still had your data scientists knew what kind of data sets they needed to go after. But when you think about agents, I mean, you don't know, right? And you don't know what they might need. And the more we know that the more data an LLM gets, the better decisions it can make. So sort of going back to just, providing that access of sipping data through a straw doesn't make sense in the era of AI and agents and LLMs that are starving for data. So I think that organizations are going to have to rethink, the age old, okay, you need to get access to this, or you, and really think about how they can make data more readily available with confidence that they're not going to provide access to data to the wrong people.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. Um, so that relates to another question that we're going to have here, which is the pressure that a lot of organizations are under to move quickly on AI, for exactly the reasons that we've talked about, just the potential and the ability of LLMs and agentic AI to really transform workflows and to deliver enormous business value. So this pressure to move quickly on AI and to embrace AI tools often exposes a lot of the problems with organizations' data ecosystems. It exposes things like what you just said, Dave, that maybe this framework, the way we think about data governance and access, is outdated in light of some of the new technologies that exist and their potential. So how do you see AI intersecting or pressuring efforts to democratize data? What do you think are the potential pitfalls that organizations need to look out for as they're thinking through that? How do they need to be thinking ahead and not thinking behind as these technologies really take root? Uganda, do you want to start with that one?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, it's a great question, and I deal it with every day. So with AI coming into the picture now, hey, we have all the data platforms. Now we have the AI tools. How can we plug and get the things quicker, faster, and more? We don't know what we know, right? The predictive analytics, they like that. So this actually puts more pressure on the data teams that okay, now you have a not a prescribed or a very standard way of data access is coming. The AI team is coming up with chatbots or SQL agents that can ask different questions. So is your data is ready, or if it is bad, the LLM will hallucinate, and then it's giving a wrong information, and then it may lead to different issues if it is hallucinate or if it give a wrong information. So now I think there is more focus on data to be ready for the AI systems, because like we were looking in a world of like productivity increase. We have AI ready now. Let's see how soon we can plug the AI to the data systems and then get insights out of it and improve like efficiency, how we can improve employee productivity like this. So now, yeah, definitely going back to the books on, hey, whenever we develop a data system, with all the governance, with all the data quality, with all the reliability, how we used to do it. Now, actually, we have a real need to ensure that, okay, the business is not only looking into these 3 or 4 check boxes, but hey, you need to look beyond that, beyond what an LLM looks like. Is your data ready for LLM to really read it? Because by default, data will not be. You have to vectorize it. So that those are some of the trends that are actually pushing the data teams to be more, I would say, uh, more proactive, make it ready, make it more, like also from a governance standpoint, it's not that open up everything for AI. We need to have governance from a data as well as from the AI standpoint to make it actually, a balanced.
Yeah, great points. Dave, your thoughts on that?
Well, it's like one of the things is that it's not just a company's or an enterprise's own data. Well, it is their own data, it's their own databases. But when you think about LLMs, the big LLMs are They're all offered by the hyperscalers. And there's a lot of worry in the customers that I talk to about their data leaking outside of their organization to those LLMs. And they don't obviously don't want that and are very afraid of that. Is that, basically their data is being used to train a general purpose LLM that some other competitor or industry person could use to their to their advantage. So I haven't really heard some good solutions to those things yet. I mean, does that mean each enterprise is going to have to host their own LLM? And that, I don't know how practical that is. So I think there's some bigger issues here that go beyond just data access to data in your data platforms, and more about, what does that mean for data leaking outside of the enterprise? And there's a lot of consternation on that. So I think that the whole issue of data security is even more complicated in the era of agentic AI. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens there. I wish I had an answer because I don't, but
Absolutely. Shashank, what are you seeing?
Yeah, I think great points. And probably I think it's a bit of a paradox, right? From a democratization perspective, it's a dream. Imagine a business user can come in there with minimal technical skills and access at least basic analysis, right? Through a good semantic layer or through just good prompting. But also there's an aspect of, it's what I would say a brutal auditor of your data infrastructure. So if it's not in place, right, it's quite the opposite. So I think obviously, you know as most organizations, I'm sure, are facing this pressure to get AI ready data. And I think secondly, to Dave, your point around security is, I think, one of the most probably concerning issues right now. There's also an aspect of, I would, what we say what we call responsible AI or ethical AI, which also brings back the whole, how is the data being used, and do those use cases, does the data actually contextually support those kind of use cases, and how do we actually put guardrails around that, right? Which, as you can imagine, we have had many recent issues as well. I think one of the issues that happened just a couple of days ago as well. So I think it just shines a light on data. And I think one of my professors had talked about it. If you torture data enough, it'll tell you anything, right? So yeah.
Yeah, excellent points all around. So one thing that we also see, and to those points, Shashank, is metadata, lineage, and context are all critical for responsible self-service access. So that is true in kind of the way that data is used throughout organizations today. But as we start using agents, as there starts to, I mean, through LLMs, maybe be less transparency about some of those things. What are some investments that you see organizations making in data tooling or architecture that pay off in terms of maintaining that democratized environment? So why don't we start with Shashank on that one?
Yeah, sure. Though I feel, I'm sure both Dave and Ugandar will have more detailed answers, but I think obviously there are now AI powered catalogs available. I mean, we ourselves are also running uh, programs on AI for data quality, and that's where agents can prove to be very useful, both from a monitoring and a fixing standpoint. But both of which I think are more recent entrants, and they actually need to. There's a little more to be desired in terms of maturity in this space, but nonetheless, I think it's a very promising start, right? And I know we are experimenting quite a bit in that area.
Absolutely. Dave?
yeah, actually, that's interesting. I like agents and data quality agents. I think that's a real big opportunity. So I'd agree with Shashank on that. But I kind of think of being in the semantic layer space, it's like we also integrate a lot with the data catalog. And the way I kind of see it is that a data catalog is, and regardless of how you build it, whether you do it manually or with AI, it becomes like a dictionary of sorts, which is great. It's like documentation, right? And yeah, you want customers to go and read it and understand it, and maybe they could use it to find data sets. But the semantic layer is more operational. In other words, it's delivering sort of queries. It's a query endpoint, as opposed to, and obviously the metadata and all the terms and everything else are exposed through there. So I see them as two different roles that work really well together, two different types of technologies that work well together. Is that you can have a data catalog. It's great for finding the data that you need. It's also great for defining the data that you have and providing an overall reference of all your data assets. But I still think you need that operational side. You need to be able to allow those BI tools and those agents to actually ask questions of the data. And to that, for me, like a semantic layer platform is a great way to do that. You add those two together, and I think you got and then you do your data quality with agents, and you organize around a cloud data platform, and you got a pretty good stack there, I think.
Yeah, great points, Dave. Ugandar?
I think yeah, Dave most of them covered. So point, yeah, what we can like, there is another trend, what I observed at least, how we can have like data marketplaces, right? Like, having that self-serve interface for users to explore. Like it's just, it's a kind of a flavor on top of your data catalogs to browse and access different data sets, and then it will help especially non-technical users to not to like most of these data catalog tools are pretty technical. You need to be tech savvy to understand the inner workings on how to navigate. So having that type of data marketplace, most of the cloud providers are now coming up with that. And as they pointed that, yeah, these analytic tools or semantic layers have to be seamlessly integrated back into these data catalogs and lineage, so that you don't need to go to multiple places to find. Yeah.
Yeah, great points. So we've talked about what organizations can do to start piloting data democratization efforts, what kinds of infrastructure might be necessary to do that. But let's talk about sustained success. So once you've got some pilots running, once you've put some things into production that seem to be yielding some values, you've got some limited use cases that maybe are working well, or you've at least gotten some feedback that you think allows you to build off of those. What are the organizational structures or incentives that you guys have seen that have helped to sustain momentum in the companies that you've worked with, and what kind of cross-functional alignment is necessary to really build support for these initiatives throughout organizations? Why don't we start with Uganda on that one?
Yeah. So yeah, this is actually a tricky thing, because you're not only dealing with your own org and own team, but you're actually going cross-functional teams to get an alignment on what's you're democratizing your data, but how do you ensure that everyone is coming along with the same objectives that the organization is heading for. So like at least from my personal experience, like some of the things that really worked out well was like having these data councils or like architecture review boards. So we used to have those meetings, quite often, to whenever a new technology is coming, whenever a new thing is coming, we have these type of use cases. So we're trying to do these are something that we don't have any solution. Let's build up something. So that kind of a forum helped us to navigate these technical advancements. So far from last 10 years, we've seen a significant change in the technology, but at least in the last one year, we've seen more on the AI side. But just to have these organizational, cross-functional organizational alignment councils, groups, definitely leadership will have their own, but from a technical standpoint, if you have these type of boards, a center of excellence or review boards, that helps us to at least navigate the changes seamlessly. That's what worked at least for us.
Great points. Dave?
Um, yeah, it's a lot. Another way to ask this question is like, how do you measure your ROI for your investments in analytics and data? And so I hear that question a lot. And the way I always answer is like, for me, it's like people vote with their feet, right? So when it comes to usage and consumption of the data products, you want to see more users asking more questions or getting answers to questions, I should say. And that should be an up and to the right kind of a line. So what I like to do is literally measure consumption and consumption of those data products, and hopefully, if you're successful, you're creating an infrastructure, and you're creating an infrastructure that's promoting people doing self-service analytics. You should see that line up and to the right of usage and number of users, number of queries and number of users per day, per month, per year, and you should measure that all the time.
Yeah, excellent point. Shishing?
Yeah, I've seen a few different models in my experience, but one of the models I've seen be very effective is having like a strong centralized chief data office of sorts, right? Who's responsible for the frameworks, for the standards, for the strategy, including the acquisition strategy in partnership with, let's say, the business, governance standards, so on and so forth. And the day to day is kind of embedded in data domains, right? Either through some sort of data stewards or data owners who will actually help execute that strategy on a day-to-day basis with each domain. Then obviously from a cultural standpoint, I would think something like tying um, having incentives to operate in a data driven manner, I think is critical, right? Because it all comes down to incentives. And I have actually seen this work very well, where, if you're able to kind of make it goals for the year, goals for the quarter, where, a data driven approach is adopted for certain processes or for certain workflows, it really helps drive that culture along. So, in addition to what Dave mentioned, I would say these couple of things.
Yeah, excellent points. And we've got a couple of comments in the chat related to that I just want to highlight. And Mohammed Nasser says organizational structure is a great source of success, and it's at the same time one of the most prominent reasons for failure. Absolutely true. And then Aaron asks, how can we tell if an organization is culturally ready to expand data democratization beyond a single team, especially when departments have very different subcultures and access protocols? And I'll take a different angle on that, and that is when you have we've talked about the hub and spoke model, or having kind of a center of excellence or a chief data office. And I think those are excellent points and excellent potential solutions. But I think one of the challenges that comes along anytime you've got, even if when it's not a totally top down approach, when it's even hub and spoke, is what is the challenge for the data team or for that center of excellence to really understand the unique characteristics of each of these different organizational units. Say you're trying to expand a use case beyond one place where it's worked, and you want to expand it to other teams or departments or business units. How do you understand the culture of that particular business unit? How do you get embedded in that quickly, so that you can effectively deploy that use case in a new setting with different people, perhaps with totally different cultures, and maybe with different data silos? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I can
You know,
just
oh,
very quickly. I think something I touched upon briefly, the whole data steward concept, I think I've seen really work. So they typically work like bridge builders, so to speak, right? So they're the ones who are embedded in that organization, in that domain, right? Understand the context and the culture of that domain, and are able to tie it back to the strong governance frameworks we have from a more centralized capacity, right? So there's that. And I think also, as you can imagine, most organizations now will also have these sort of guilds, communities, right? I think those as well, I mean, while you can always have a formal community, I think we're in an informal way, you're able to kind of inform a lot of the challenges that, let's say, a centralized team is seeing, or kind of make it a more informal session, or a kind of open office session where you can actually interact with the consumers of the data. But I think topmost is just leadership, right? If you don't hear your leaders talking about where's the data, how was this decision made, right, and really espousing commitment to data governance and data quality, I think that is non-negotiable. That is the primary aspect. Yeah.
Yeah, just add on that. So it's like I really think that the data steward and the guild is really important, and those really help. And having those embedded in the business is great. Um, and but you just hit on something about really. I think that the culture of data and analytics needs to be driven from the top down. And so the management team needs to demand that you're making data-driven decisions, that when you're in meetings, you're not just doing it based on gut, but you're actually introducing and making decisions based on the data. And I think if you do that, I think that creates the right culture from top down. It can get more people to really think about making decisions and making arguments based on that. But like just having been like a chief data officer in the past, what I've realized is that you can never predict what the business needs or what they want. I mean, they understand their business. I mean, for me, Yahoo front page, they understood what they need to do. I don't know what their business is. I don't know what search and display is. Those guys do. And so for me, my goal was always just provide them with the data they need, with the right governance and the consistency and the accuracy, and then they're going to create amazing things. And my God, it's like I was so amazed at what they created with my stupid raw data, my stupid CSVs that I would give them. It would be like, that's crazy what you were able to do with that. And so that's always been, I think, what always would be my goal, is open access to data and trust the business. If you have to providing the right governance and right tools and access, trust the business that they're going to create some amazing insights that you had never imagined, and empower them to do that, and the organization is going to be better for it.
Great points. Uganda, anything to add there?
No, completely. I itself, like myself, in witness so many circumstances, like business coming up with the Power BI dashboards. Wow, is this the data what we have? Like, amazing insight that, a business folks will see than, a technical folks. So having that openness and, giving with the trust, I think it goes long way. And just to add on top of, like, I think what Aaron was asking about, like, how do we ensure that keep this data democratization going on when there are some teams and departments that doesn't culturally fit into the program, right? So it's a kind of, in a big organization, it's a very common problem. How do we get along with the teams that are kind of siloed or fragmented, and how do we make sure they were part of the journey, because they are good at what they do. They are silo teams. They have been operating for years. They are, the experts on that domain data. So how do we make them more trust and then get them into the mainstream and giving them the transparency and the incentives that, okay, this data is a gold mine. How do we make that into the flow? So that type of visibility and giving them the perfect, like, the roles and responsibilities on the data ownership, that goes one way of actually dealing those type of scenarios.
Yeah, great points. One thing that we commonly hear when we talk to chief data officers, CIOs, folks who are really leading the charge in a lot of ways on AI in their organizations, the stakes come up a lot. The stakes are higher than ever. That's what's keeping folks up at night who are in the leadership of data organizations, is the stakes are higher than ever. In many ways, the opportunities are higher than ever. The budgets are there in ways maybe they haven't always been. The desire from the top down of the business to be data driven and to be AI first organizations has really started to come about over the last couple of years. But as this expands, as AI becomes more embedded as in business processes, as it becomes more important to organizations to stay competitive, the cost of getting it wrong also gets much higher and much scarier for these folks who are leading the charge. So how do you guys see the stakes and the strategies changing over the next few years? What would your guidance be to other folks who are in similar positions to you guys, of trying their best to get this right? What are the things that they should really keep in mind in the near future? Dave, you want to start with that one?
Yeah, I think we're moving from almost like I call it like manual analytics, where people are like using tools, BI tools, or Tableau dashboards, or Power BI, and they're basically, asking questions through a very structured interface. And for me, even natural language query is, yeah, it's a little bit more of the same. It's a little easier to ask the question if it's not already in the format you want. But to me, the big difference is basically that manual people-based analytics versus autonomous analytics. Like what we're going to see with agents is that you're going to have machines asking questions, and that just raises the bar on the governance and the accuracy requirements. They go through the roof, right? Because if you can imagine, you got some rogue agent going off and making bad decisions, you may not even know that it's happening until it's too late. So the velocity, I think, at which we're going to be able to run analytics with machines is something that I don't think anybody appreciates yet, because it's not, we have customers running 120,000 queries a day. Those are people doing that. Can you imagine when you have an agent that's just running an agent? You're going to be talking about millions or tens of millions or even hundreds of millions of questions per day. And how do you make sure that that those questions are on the up and up, and that you're delivering accurate answers? That's tough. And how do you scale to be able to handle that kind of volume? I think it's going to be crazy.
Yeah, absolutely. Great points. Ugandar?
Yeah, I think Dave touched the right point on, because now AI becoming mainstream into majority of the business processes, and going forward, even you'll have the agents that make automated decisions, right? So you need to make sure the data is right, your agent setup and whatever the rules they were doing, it is, the AI governance, your data governance, from an observability, from a traceability standpoint. So those are some of things that will go into, like more focus will be on those, like maybe even the responsible AI, like how do we ensure that if AI is giving the full control of, automated things, so how do we ensure it is doing ethically and without bias, and it may lead to the complexing, and that is where whenever we are designing these systems, right from the beginning, at least as an architect, that we need to focus on the edge cases, the different aspects of, what is the business problem, how we can ensure the security is aligned into the process, how can we ensure that the policies and the governance, and then the AA team. So everyone has to be have more collaboration actually going forward. That we're dealing with something that we're not sure how it will actually go if we don't have proper controls. So that the control piece, the governance, and your data quality, data governance. So these things, I think, will play a big role.
Yeah, great points. Shashank?
Yeah, I think Gandhar and Dave have covered most points. I'll probably just make an additional point. I think where we are headed with with agents and in general the super super fast evolution of LLMs, right? I think so. The competitive advantage won't necessarily be AI per se, right? It's going to be the the data that organizations have. So because I think AI will get commoditized, right, over probably the next few years. So it's going to be all about, if data is going to be your competitive edge, how do you treat it the right way, right? I think that will pretty much form the culture and will define the winners in the marketplace. Yeah.
Points. Well, we're just about out of time, but we want to wrap up with our lightning round very quickly, which is just in one phrase or a couple. What do you guys think is the one factor that, or the most important factor that separates organizations that succeed with data democratization efforts from those that fail or that stall out? Shashank, you want to start with that one?
Sure. For me, I think it's leadership. It just comes down to leadership and leadership endorsement.
For me, it will be definitely the data and the culture. You need to be culturally ready and change, accept the change with all the technology coming. Yeah, it's a data and people culture.
And Dave, we'll give you the last word.
Organization. I think you got to have an organization that supports the business and is governed, and I think you can't do it without a semantic layer. So shameless plug, but I don't know how you do that in the era of AI or BI for that matter.
Excellent points all around and great discussion, guys. Much appreciated for joining us today. I want to say thank you to all of our audience for participating with us as well. Great insights from our panelists. And if you missed any of this webinar or want to rewatch anything, the recording will be available just a few minutes after this webinar if you refresh this page. And we'll also send out the YouTube video tomorrow. Thank you again to all of our panelists and to our partners at AtScale for making this webinar possible. And we'll see all of you again next time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.